This is the Tamron 17-70 f2.8 for Sony E-Mount, and I would describe it as the most important lens I've owned for any of my cameras so far. I've had it for a little over 2 years, and throughout that time, it has been my main workhorse lens for pretty much 95% of everything I've shot. And I'm not gonna say that all of the growth I've had as a filmmaker and photographer has happened specifically because of this lens, but it's definitely been a really useful tool that has helped me a lot along the way. I bought this because I wanted to finally upgrade to a better all-purpose zoom lens from the little 16-50 kit lens that comes with some of the Sony APS-C cameras, and these days you have a few other options when it comes to all-purpose f2.8 zooms for Sony that would kind of be equivalent to this. You have the Sony 16-55 f2.8 and the Sigma 18-50 f2.8, but back when I bought the Tamron, the Sigma definitely wasn't released yet, and I'm not completely sure, but I think the Sony one was released around the same time as the Tamron, but that cost way more money and I just didn't want to spend that much. And ever since I picked up the Tamron, I have had the chance to briefly use the other two as well, and there are a few reasons, which I'll talk about a bit later, why I would always pick the Tamron if I had to go and buy one of them today. So over the years, I've been using this lens for a very wide variety of stuff, like these YouTube videos, commercials for local businesses, personal spec projects, and behind the scenes for other fellow creators, and it is just so damn versatile. There has rarely ever been a situation where this lens hasn't been able to do what I need it to. And 99% of the time, I know that even if I am not able to bring any other lens for a project, this one will have me covered. I'm not going to show you any charts, clips zoomed into 500% to look at chromatic aberration or whatever. There are plenty of technical reviews for this lens out there already. What I care about much more is the non-technical experience of using it. And when it comes to that, there are a bunch of things that I really like about this lens. For starters, an obvious one, the constant f2.8 aperture. It's not like you can shoot in pitch black with this lens, but it actually does really well even in low light. Plus, I rarely ever find myself working in environments that are so dark that this can't keep up. It does happen, but just not very often. Something else I've learned to really appreciate over the years is the reach that this lens has, and that's also one of the reasons why earlier I said that I would always go with this one over the other two lenses. The Sony is a little wider at 16mm than the Tamron at 17, but like, I don't mind taking a few steps back if I need to, and the Sigma starts at 18mm, which isn't as wide as the Tamron. But where the Tamron really shines is at the far end, and you might not think that 70mm versus like 50 or 55 is a big deal, but trust me, it is a big deal. Having that extra reach at the telephoto end is so useful in certain situations. It works great for close-up shots when you want to get more subject separation even at f2.8, but it's also really nice when you just can't physically get close enough to what you're shooting. And having such a huge zoom range makes it so much easier to get the framing that you want, which is especially true if you are a solo filmmaker like myself who often works in these run-and-gun scenarios. And you can use clear image zoom to make this lens a 17-105 at f2.8, which is just crazy. And another thing that makes this lens a better pick for me than the other two is the fact that it has built-in stabilization where the others don't. And that's especially helpful if you're going to be using it with a camera that doesn't have in-body stabilization. That was the case for me a while back when I was shooting mainly with my Sony a6400. Now that I've got an FX30, which does have stabilization built in, it might not be that big of a deal, but considering the Sony lens costs way more and it doesn't have stabilization, the fact that the Tamron has it is a huge win. Optically, I have no complaints about the 17-70, and again, I'm not someone who's gonna pixel peep, and I don't care about what an image looks like zoomed in at like 700% in the top right corner. I've heard some people having copies where the image is slightly soft at 70mm, but from what I've seen, it's not something that makes the lens unusable. And having used the other two a few times, I wouldn't say that there's like a noticeable enough difference in the optical quality to where you would be able to say that one is so much better than the others. The only thing that I would potentially say the Sigma does better is it is way smaller and lighter. So if you're going for the most compact setup possible and you don't need stabilization, you could look into that one. So yeah, I love this lens and I would highly recommend it to anyone looking for an all-purpose zoom lens for APS-C E-Mount. And even though I'm not one to get super attached to camera gear, as long as I'm using an APS-C Sony camera, I am going to do my best to take care of this lens, and I'll try to keep using it as much as I can because it's just really cool.